Hey, welcome back, friend. Hey, appreciate you coming by this June 7th, also known as World Karen Day. Me? I don't give a shit. How about you, Chester? Couple of fuddy-duddies we are. Anyway, come on in out of the heat. Same temperature in here, but, well, come on in anyway. So, with the heat creeping up, I thought I'd bring down the temperature a bit with a nice cold Halloween story. Thank you, Clarence. He's a sucker for wordplay humor. Ooh, it's the Crimson Hour here at the Weekend Abode, so we better get started. 'Cause when that last look of light fades away, it's gonna be you, me, and whatever's waiting in these walls for the lights to go out. That's right. Are you ready? Well, good, 'cause tonight we're joined by author Michael Marks by way of our friends at Velox Books. This one comes from his collection, Spiraling Down. So without further delay, from author Michael Marks, I give you A Cold Halloween Night. I got the first hint of what my brother was when I was 5 years old. He was outside playing near the edge of the woods on our family's property, and I was sitting on the back porch playing with my dolls. Our mother was just inside the kitchen so she could keep an eye on both of us from the window. I was well and truly absorbed in my imagination when I heard his voice whisper my name. Allison. I looked up from my toys to see him waving me over to where he was standing. He had a huge smile on his face and seemed really excited about something. I, being 5, also became excited by proxy. I scooped up my favorite doll in my arms and hurried down the stairs to see what was making him so happy. As I approached, he blocked my view of whatever was just behind him and started to giggle. My brother was 12 at the time, quite a bit older than me, so when I got close to him sometimes he would seem larger than life, like one of the big people.
Do you want to see what I found?
He asked, with a clear tone of exuberance. I nodded like my head was on a spring, eager to see what he had found. He stepped aside, and what had made him so happy finally came into view. It was a rabbit who had crawled in from the edge of the woods. Its back leg had been mangled somehow, likely by either a dog or a trap. I remember the sense of excitement I felt fading as I realized the poor bunny had been injured. It looked up at me with sad eyes, and I walked over to pet it gently. It's hurt, I said as I turned to my brother with a frown, hoping he was going to try and help it. He just stared down at it with a smile, his eyes still looking extremely excited.
I know,
he said, practically laughing the words out.
Watch this.
He walked over and placed the sole of his shoe over the top of the rabbit's head. I can still remember the animal's rapid breathing as he did so, its body quickly rising and falling beneath my hand. I stared at him in confusion, wondering why he would do that, as he very slowly started to press his foot down. The rabbit started making these awful squeals. The closest sound that I can compare it to would be like that of a human baby crying. I tried my best to push his foot off, but he just kept pressing down harder.
No, Adam, no!
I shouted, finally dropping my doll and hitting his leg. He simply laughed as it squealed louder, obviously in extreme pain now. Its working legs kicked at the leaves and its breathing became erratic. The look on my brother's face made me feel uncomfortable, even at that age, not understanding what it was, why he would do that. Everything from the wildness of his eyes to the bit of drool coming from the corner of his mouth was terrifying. Tears were falling down my cheeks and I begged him to stop, but he just continued to put more weight on his foot. I finally heard a crunch sound, and the squealing stopped. The rabbit twitched a few more times and then fell limp in the dirt. My brother looked at me and seemed to drink in the sadness and terror on my face. like it was what he wanted out of this more than anything else. I kept petting the rabbit as my brother suddenly scoffed at my sadness and went trotting back towards the house. There, kneeling in the dirt next to a dead rabbit at 5 years old, I started to see what my brother was. It wasn't until a cold Halloween night 5 years later that I would know for sure. A week before Halloween, my mother had helped me make a Little Red Riding Hood costume, and I was as excited as I could be to head into town and trick-or-treat with my friends from school. I can remember wearing my cape and hood around the house nearly every day leading up to Halloween. You can imagine that when my father told me that his boss had invited him and my mother to go to a Halloween party at his house, and they couldn't take me into town, I was devastated. My father was angling for a big promotion and needed as much face time with his boss as possible. He tried to explain to me how important it was, but all I heard was that I was going to miss trick-or-treating. I was about to break into tears when suddenly my brother came down the stairs.
I'll take her,
he said with a smile. My brother and I barely spoke at that age. He was an extremely withdrawn teenager and quite a bit older than me. So when he volunteered to take me, I was shocked, to say the least. "Really?" my father asked, likely even more shocked than me. It was nearly impossible to get Adam to do anything. He walked over to us and hunched down to look me in the eye. He was nearly 6 feet tall, still one of the big people.
Sure.
He spoke to our father but kept looking at me.
How about I even dress up as the big bad wolf to your Little Red Riding Hood?
All I could really do was nod in response. This level of friendliness was nothing like the stoic and strange brother I had grown to expect. My father was pleasantly surprised and thanked Adam for his help. He even called him a good big brother before he went to tell my mother. Adam stayed standing in front of me for a bit longer after our dad walked away. His still smile reminded me a bit of when he called me over to look at the rabbit, a memory I had nearly forgotten until that moment.
Thanks, Adam,
I said quietly, suddenly a little intimidated by him.
No problem, little sister.
He turned to walk away and headed back up the stairs toward his room. He looked back one final time before disappearing into the top floor.
We're gonna have fun.
Adam did exactly as he said he would. I can remember him coming out of his room in his wolf's mask, wearing the kind of rubber werewolf gloves you could get from any Halloween store. Other than that, he was just wearing his normal clothes, but honestly it was more effort than anyone expected from him. My parents laughed and took pictures of us standing next to each other. I honestly think they were just happy to see Adam do something with the family rather than spend all his time alone brooding. My mother handed over her car keys to Adam and told us to be safe and have fun. They would apparently be back late, so my mother told Adam to make sure I was in bed at a reasonable hour. With that, we left for town, just me and my brother. On the way into town, I saw something that stuck with me as if it were an omen. A kid wearing a devil mask was just walking along the road, all by himself. He seemed even younger than me, and it was miles into town. I tried to point him out to Adam, but when he went to look, the kid seemed to have vanished. Adam said it was probably just some kid that lived in one of the scattered houses outside town. I let it go, eager to get into town and start my night. The trick-or-treating went exactly as expected. I met up with my friends and we walked around the different houses and through the downtown area that was all set up for Halloween. Adam was quiet most of the night, but not unpleasant to be around. He stayed near me the whole night and seemed to be watching over me. He was acting like he was my big brother for once, and honestly, I kind of liked it. When it started to get late, he told me we had to head back. I said goodbye to my friends and hoisted my big bag of candy over my shoulder, excited to get home and check out my haul. I was happy. I enjoyed my night in town, and I was grateful to Adam for bringing me.
Thank you for bringing me, big brother.
I hugged him from the passenger seat of the car before we drove off.
I had a lot of fun tonight.
Good, I'm glad.
Adam just smiled at me with this unsettling, still smile, and then headed down the road that led to our house. A few miles from our house, my brother turned off onto a dirt road that led into the surrounding woods. I had been absorbed in hunting through my bag of candy and likely wouldn't have noticed at all if the road hadn't suddenly got bumpy. I turned to look at Adam, and his face was wearing the same stoic expression he normally wore.
Where are you going?
I asked, looking out the window into the dark woods now surrounding us. Adam kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road, his face remaining still. I can remember looking at his hands and seeing his fingers twitching on the steering wheel as he slowed the car down and pulled it over. I thought he might turn to answer me, but instead he reached into the back seat and grabbed a small bag from under the back seat. He opened it up and pulled out a pair of black gloves. I tried again to ask him what he was doing while we were out there, but he silently put the gloves on. He seemed lost in his own head, and I could feel that something was terribly wrong.
Adam, why aren't you saying anything to me?
I shouted, my heart thumping in my chest. Adam finally turned to me and smiled warmly. He reached out with one gloved hand and touched my cheek. I flinched at first, but he kept reaching forward. His eyes met mine. In the shadows of the car, they looked black.
Get out of the car.
His voice was dark and rough. It held a tinge of anger that made my blood run cold. I didn't move fast enough, so he unbuckled my seatbelt himself and reached across me to open the door.
I don't want to get out of the car,
I shouted.
What's going on? What are you doing?
He snatched a wolf mask he had been wearing that night off the back seat and got out of the car. I watched in the shine of the headlights as he walked around the front of the car and towards me. His black-gloved hand reached into the car and grabbed me by my pigtails.
I said get out of the fucking car,
he shouted as he yanked me from my seat. I cried out in pain as he pulled me into the dirt. My sack full of candy I was holding caught on the door handle, and I watched it spill out all over the ground in front of me as I lay there crying.
You hurt me, Adam.
I yelled at him with tears streaming down my face.
Why are you doing this?
He hunched down to look at me, much like he had when he told me he was going to be taking me trick-or-treating. His face wore a cold, humorless smile.
We are going to play a fun little Halloween game.
He set the small bag he had pulled the gloves from down in front of him and slid the wolf mask back on.
The big bad wolf is going to hunt Little Red Riding Hood.
What?
Is all I could say, totally confused as to what the hell he meant. Things became clearer when he reached into the small bag and pulled out my father's old K-bar knife.
I'm going to hunt you, Allison. And if I catch you 2 times, I'm going to gut you.
I couldn't believe what he was saying. He was weird and quiet, but he was my brother.
Stop trying to scare me,
I shouted at him. I started to pick up my falling candy in an attempt to deny the situation that was right in front of me. I had to believe this was just a cruel prank.
This isn't funny, Adam.
His hand reached out and grabbed me by the back of the neck, wrenching me close to him. I could smell the rubber of his wolf's mask as he held the knife up to my cheek and pressed it into my skin.
Do I look like I'm joking, little sister?
With those words, he slowly dragged the knife over my cheek, and I screamed in pain. He threw me backwards and then started stomping on my spilled candy like a spoiled child. I clutched my face and felt the blood leak out between my fingers as I sobbed. There is no moment in my life that I felt more terror. He turned back towards me and leaned in quickly with a cartoony growl. "Run!" he screamed. So I did. I got up, still holding my bleeding face, and ran into the woods. It was darker in the woods than I could have imagined, and my eyes were filled with tears, making it even more difficult to see what was in front of me. Still, I ran so hard my legs ached, and I could feel the sweat on my skin chilling me in the cold night air. Behind me, Adam had started to give chase after a quick 30 count and a howl at the moon. He was faster than me and his legs were much longer, meaning he would very quickly catch up to me. I was at a total loss of what to do. I hoped maybe I could make my way back to my house, but even then, my parents weren't home, and even if I could call 911, it would take them a long time to get there. I saw a small thicket of bushes and made a quick decision to hide inside. I dropped to my knees and started to crawl through the branches. I could feel them catching my clothes and digging into my skin. I was in so much pain and such sheer terror that I couldn't stop crying. I muttered out loud to myself, asking why he would do this, why he wanted to kill me. I was less than halfway into the thicket when I felt a hand wrap tightly around my ankle and yank me backwards.
"Oh, Allison, you are going to have to try harder than that."
Adam was standing over me, his foot pressed into my back, adding weight to each sob made by my lungs. He leaned down to look at me in the low light, his face still hiding behind that wolf mask.
"That's one. If I catch you again, it's all over."
He drug his finger over his throat and took his foot off my back, laughing as he did. I was frozen in terror. I knew he wanted me to run again, but I couldn't even stand up. All I could do is lay there and cry. The cut on my cheek had started to go numb, either from the cold or from shock, but I could feel each new scratch on my arms and legs. I started praying to myself the Lord's Prayer I had learned in Sunday school.
"Oh, please, would you knock that bullshit off?"
I felt his hand reach down and grab my collar in an attempt to pull me to my feet. I didn't budge. I simply lay there crying and praying. Adam started to get frustrated. I suddenly felt a foot come slamming into my ribs.
"Get the fuck up!"
He kicked me a few more times, but I still refused to get to my feet. I would love to say I was being defiant, but in all honesty, I was just so scared I couldn't move. I heard him pacing back and forth and mumbling to himself. I was messing with his plans and he didn't like that, not one bit. He suddenly dropped down on his hands and knees next to me and pulled off the wolf mask. His face held one of the cruelest scowls I'd ever seen, and still to this day, I've never seen another person make a face anything like it.
"I took off the mask because I want you to see my eyes when I say this,"
he hissed, his warm breath hitting my face and making me realize just how cold the night air was.
"I'm going to give you 10 seconds to get up and start running again. If you don't, I will cut your Achilles tendon so you can't walk and leave you here. Then I will go back home, kill Mom and Dad, and bring you back their severed heads to look at as I slowly cut your fucking heart out."
He was telling the truth. I didn't even need to look in his eyes to know that. I could easily hear it in his voice.
"Do you understand?"
"Yes,"
I responded faintly, the weight of everything still sinking in.
"Good."
He stood up and put his mask back on.
"Now get on your fucking feet and run."
He counted slower this time, as I did my best to weave through the trees in the dark. Each number deliberately stated in my direction, letting me know how much of a head start I had left. His voice was getting further and further away, though, and I hoped I could get far enough away that he would have some trouble finding me, giving me time to think. My chest hurt from crying and breathing hard. My legs hurt from running, and I wanted to go home. I wanted my parents to come save me, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. I fell into deep thought about how my parents never saw this in my brother. Worse than that, I thought about how could I have just let the cruelty I had seen from him before slip my mind. He hid behind a seemingly reclusive nature, appearing as just another moody teenager. But I'd seen the real him before, with the rabbit. The drool on his lips and the mania in his eyes. I knew it was behind the wolf's mask as the count stopped. To him, I was just as helpless as that bunny, and he was having fun toying with me. My mind snapped back to the moment at hand, just in time to stop me from plunging headlong down a 10-foot drop. It was a sharp cut-off ravine in the middle of a group of trees, and in the dark, I was lucky to notice it when I did. I had to balance myself to keep from tumbling over the edge as my momentum wanted desperately to carry me forward.
"Allison!"
I heard Adam shout as he started to close in. I looked to either side of me, but the ravine seemed to stretch on forever on either side. I would need to climb down to keep going forward. In my dress and cloak, it would be nearly impossible to do quickly, and I could already hear Adam's footsteps getting closer. He was running after me at full speed, and if he caught me in the bottom of the ravine, it was over. I had to try something else. I searched around where I was for a low-hanging branch. There were several trees scattered along the edge of the ravine where I was, and I found one that was almost perfect. It was just a little bit taller than me, and it even had some small brush around it. I quickly untied my cloak and hung the hood over the branch. The bushes around the base filled out the bottom a bit, making it almost look like a person from behind, at least if you looked at it quickly. I hoped that Adam's wolf mask would obstruct his vision just enough that he would think it was me. I ran a few feet away and hid behind a tree, trying to remain as still as possible. Without my cloak on, it was absolutely freezing in those woods. I felt the goose flesh rise on my skin and struggled to stop my teeth from chattering. I held back tiny sobs as I heard Adam come barreling through the trees like a maniac, howling at the moon.
"Allison!"
he screamed again.
"I see you, you stupid little bitch! You better keep running!"
I peeked out from behind the tree and saw him making a beeline for the cloak. I found myself praying that he wouldn't see. Just don't see it. Just fall. Each stride he made towards the ravine made my heart thunder in my chest. I heard the footfalls come to a sudden stop and peered out from behind the tree once again. I saw him standing there at the edge with my cloak in his hands, and I had to cover my own mouth to hide the sound of my crying.
"Do you think I'm stupid, Allison?"
I could see him looking around for me in the dark.
"Did you think I was just going to fall for that?"
He was standing there just laughing. I prayed he would just slip in that moment. He would just tumble back in the ravine and break his neck. My tears stopped, and I felt a heat of anger rush into my face. I felt fresh blood leak out of my cheek as I gripped my teeth.
"Just for that, you know what I'm going to do?"
he called out, aware that I was still nearby.
"I'm going to kill Mom and Dad anyway. Hell, I was always going to do that. This is my last Halloween, little sister. tonight, I'm going out big. I might go back into town and take out some of your friends too. Maybe I'll just hurt you really bad and save you for last. Leave you out in the woods to bleed.
My hand found a fallen tree branch on the ground and gripped it tightly.
Same plan as before. I'll bring you all their fucking heads so you can look into their eyes as I cut you into ribbons, little sister. You had your Halloween fun. Now get out here and let me have mine.
I didn't even realize what I was doing at first, and I think it shocked Adam even more. I came from behind a tree screaming, with the branch held out in front of me like a spear. I ran toward him at full speed before he could decide if he was amused or scared. I think he may have even been in the middle of starting another rant when he finally saw what was happening. I put all my weight behind it as I thrust forward into his chest with that branch and watched as he lost his footing. I kept pushing until I knew he was going to fall. I heard him try and say one last thing before he vanished down the drop-off. I fell to my knees sobbing in a mix of anger and fear as I heard him tumble down the drop-off. I listened as his body landed with a pronounced thud on the ground below. It was quickly followed by a horrid screech of pain. I crawled to the edge and looked over. At the bottom, I saw Adam lying there with one of his legs twisted the wrong way and the knife he had used to cut my cheek sticking firmly out of his chest. He pulled the mask from his face and stared up at me with desperate, horrified eyes. He would occasionally reach up and try and touch the handle of the blade, but every time he did, he would force out another scream that would end up a gurgling, blood-filled cough. I slowly climbed down the side of the ravine in the safest spot I could, the whole time listening to Adam cry and attempt to scream. When I reached his side, I looked down on him with tears in my eyes and my heart full of pity. He reminded me of the rabbit. The fear in his eyes was exactly the same. His rapid, blood-choked breath signaling that his life was almost over. He reached out to me, and for the first time since we had arrived in the woods that night, he looked like my brother. My eyes were filled with tears, and didn't know if I was sad for him or hated his guts, but really it was both. I knelt next to him, just staring at him and crying as his gloved hand reached out to me. I couldn't look at him anymore, but something also wouldn't let me leave him to die alone. I closed my eyes and listened for a few more minutes as his labored breath slowed and eventually stopped. On my knees in the dirt, next to his lifeless body, I was once again reminded of the rabbit. I covered his body with my cloak and walked back towards the car. Luckily, the beams of its headlights were still on and made for a good beacon back to the road. Both doors still stood wide open, and the candy I had collected trick-or-treating still lay scattered all over the ground. I climbed inside and shut both doors. I laid down across the front seat and cried for I don't know how long. Eventually, one of our distant neighbors found me and brought me home to my insanely worried parents. They had already been on the phone with the police by the time I got home. I can remember them asking where Adam was, what happened, how I got the cut on my face. I tried to explain, but I couldn't stop shaking and crying. I just wanted to go back to earlier that night, trick-or-treating with my friends, my big brother watching over me. I wanted it all to be a dream. When the police found Adam's body, they pieced it together, though, and I ended up having to fill in what blanks were there. I had to accept it was real and so did my parents. Nothing was ever the same after that. My family fell apart, and my world fell apart. Sometimes at night, I close my eyes and I can see Adam's face begging for my help. I don't feel pity anymore for him. I remember the rabbit. I touch the scar on my face and I try to forget him. For 20 years now, I've tried to forget that cold Halloween night. And that was A Cold Halloween Night by author Michael Marks. A good reminder to just stay home and hand out the candy. Actually, maybe just leave home altogether. You can't trust anyone. The story is from Michael's book Spiraling Down. Pick up an audiobook from audible.com or grab a Kindle or print copy from Velox Books, your source for premium unleaded nightmare fuel. Thanks, Michael. The Crimson Hour is a production of the Sinister Somnolence Network. All narration and audio production by yours truly. Co-produced by Geoff Sturtevant. You can follow me on Facebook for news and upcoming releases on both this show and Drew Blood's Dark Tales, my Friday night show on Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights. I hope to see you there too. But hey, while we're here, please hit all those obligatory buttons and share if you don't mind. We'd really appreciate it. The Crimson Hour is accepting submissions. If you've got a story or two you'd like to be featured on this show, send it to drewbloodhorror@gmail.com. If selected, you'll get the full treatment. Well, the Crimson Hour's over, and you know what that means. Things are about to get pretty dark around here. Hey, before you go, we're always looking for reviews on Apple Podcasts. If you're kind enough to leave one for me, I'll shout you out on the show. And if you're here on YouTube, feel free to hit the like button and say hi below. I read all the comments. And with that, safe travels, friend. I'll see you all next time at the Crimson Hour. Good night, friends.